But we just need to come back briefly, if we could, to the scandal of grooming gangs. The Prime Minister seeming to say that any politician, or indeed anyone who seemed to support the idea of a public inquiry, was effectively getting on the bandwagon of being a right-winger. Nigel Farage, how do you respond to that?
I get a bit...
So here we have Nigel Farage earlier today on LBC making the announcement that if the Labour Party do not launch a public inquiry into the grooming gang scandal, he will do it himself. Take a listen.
With this far-right label, I mean, the BBC use it about virtually every country in the world these days. I mean, I've no doubt Canada very soon will go far-right, and Italy's gone far-right. And look, I honestly believe that through the police, through social services, through the last days of the Labour government, through the entirety of the last Conservative government, there has been a concerted attempt to play this down for fear of what it might do, for fear of being called racist. The irony is that the attacks themselves were racist. This was anti-white female racism. Of that I have no doubt. And let me say this, Nick. If the government will not hold a full public inquiry, and how interesting that the Times editorial today has come out strongly in support of it, I'll say this to you now. If they won't do it, we at Reform will do it. I will have no difficulty in raising the money to do this whatsoever. We'll appoint independent ex-judges and experts, and we will have this out in public. And I hope, Sir Keir...
Will you have the statutory powers that will be granted to you through a public inquiry?
No, I won't have the statutory powers, but I tell you what, I think this would garner such massive public support that anybody that was asked to appear that didn't appear would look terrible.
What would your deadline be for the government to take action?
Well, I think we've probably got a few weeks, but no more than that. And I think there is now overwhelming demand for us to know the full, unvarnished truth, however horrid it may be.
So today is the January the 7th. You'll give them to the end of January?
Effectively, yes. And if we, Nick, I promise you, I can raise the money for it today. Not from Elon Musk either. I can raise the money for it today, and we can do this. And I mean it. I mean it. And I think that the government will know that when I say something, I mean it. So I tell you what, guys, get on and just do it.
So there we go, Nigel Farage saying on LBC there earlier that if the Labour Party do not, within the next few weeks, change their mind and take a decision to run a full national public inquiry into the grooming gang scandal, that he will do it himself. Now, what are my thoughts on this? Well, I think that it was good for Nigel Farage to say this because it absolutely will put pressure on the government to do the right thing. Now, I would like the outcome of that pressure that he has asserted there to be that the Labour government decides to do it themselves. And I think that his threat there could potentially be effective. Because if they don't do it and Nigel Farage does it himself, and we know from him appointing private investigators for the Manchester airport assault on officers that he means his word, he is a man of his word, and he will do something himself about it. Can you imagine how disastrous it would look for Labour if it is then Farage who is the one who brings justice for victims, and it looks like the Labour Party just did not give a toss? That will be absolutely disastrous for the party, their reputation in the short and the long run, if you ask me. It's seen as this is the party that was too coward to do something about the grooming gangs. Reform were the only party to do something about it. So I think that this may be effective. But, Nick Ferrari, he makes the point there. Will you have the statutory powers, if you do it privately yourself, to force people to turn up to be interviewed at that inquiry? Now, Nigel Farage there seems to, downplay the effects of not having a statutory powers. He thinks, it will be embarrassing for them not to turn up. But, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people do not turn up, who should turn up, that should be held to account at this inquiry if they do not have those powers. So I think it absolutely will be better if the government do this themselves. That being said, if the government don't do anything, a private inquiry, funded privately and put in place by the Reform Party, I think that is absolutely better than nothing, and that should be done. But if the government does it, that is even better, because they've got those statutory powers to make sure that people turn up, who should be questioned and should be held to account for their actions. Also, whatever recommendations and reports come about as a consequence probably will be considered to have more validity if this is an inquiry that has been commissioned by the government itself, rather than a party that's done this independently that is not in power. Also, if it is the Labour Party that take the decision to run a public inquiry on this, it helps reduce the chance that this issue gets dismissed once again as just sort of, a far-right bandwagon, to use Keir Starmer's words himself, because that is the reason why this issue has been put, brushed under the carpet so many times. I like the fact that Nigel Farage, Rupert Lowe, etc. are talking about this issue loudly at the moment, but I do not want it to be the case that it's only people on the right who are talking about this. We need people all across the political spectrum to talk about this and to make this a priority, else it will be dismissed once again as a far-right issue. Now, the downsides of the inquiry being done by the government is, although they'll say that they've appointed people who are so-called independents to run the show, there is a good chance that, they pull the appropriate strings to make sure that people in the Labour Party do not have their reputation smeared and their accountability put at the front of the papers and whatnot. People who have done, Labour councillors, for example, who acted inappropriately. We very much are aware that there are Labour councillors that did not do their jobs properly on this. We had an Oldham councillor in the Tory party speaking on GB News earlier today about how councillors in the Labour Party at Oldham have absolutely failed for years and years. I think that the Labour Party are going to be very, very queasy if there is an inquiry held about the impact on their reputation. Will we see that inquiry really, really dig into the CPS? Keir Starmer is going to be very, very queasy about that. So there is a small concern that if it is done by the government, that they may be able to influence it to make sure it doesn't damage their reputation too much. We want full transparency. Individuals, doesn't matter what party they're from, to be held to account if they did not act appropriately on this. So there we go. Let's see what happens. Farage has said that he will give them till the end of the month to sort themselves out. Let's see if Farage really means business then, and if he actually goes ahead with this. Thank you very much for watching. We will keep you updated with any changes to the situation on the grooming gang scandal, of course. See you all soon.
Still watching? Well, I've got a quick ask for you. Recent UK, we're fighting the woke brigade and inspiring young Brits, but we need your help to go bigger. We're hosting a fundraiser and would love you to sign up and share the link on the big day. It's easy, it makes a massive impact, and there are prizes for top fundraisers. Click the Google form in the description to join us. Cheers very much. Let's keep going together.